So another things we talk about the challenges, open source. And I'm going to go to Nick first.
Okay.
And what do you think about open source and why? How can we take an advantage of open source? I know it's really difficult. We are never able to get any advantage of it so far. How can we pass that barrier using open source libraries, Nick? What is your suggestion?
Well, I would say that you actually cannot do DevSecOps or DevOps today without the open source community. In fact, most products that you're going to be using are, coming from the open source community, and including plugins and libraries and pretty much the entire stack from, Jenkins to even, scanning technologies, plugins, are dependent on open source communities. You would not be able to orchestrate your stack, Istio, Service Mesh, same thing, open source product. So I understand that some people are still, unfortunately, for the U.S. government, worried about open source, and it's time for them to move to the 21st century. But we have actually much more visibility and better understanding of what's going on with open source software than we do when you just buy an off-the-shelf product that you don't have any access to the source code, and you actually cannot really truly see what's going on. So with all the tools that we actually leverage for CyberStack, between static dynamic analysis, funding and testing tools, and bit of materials, lifecycle tools, I think you can actually get a much better understanding of open source compared to compiled binaries that you can get from your vendor. So,
Jeff, anything else? Otherwise, I have another follow-up question. So, anything is blocking us not to use open source in DoD? Is there any policy that says no?
No, in fact, there's actually policy. There's written policy that encourages evaluation of open source as solutions. I think one of the things that historically challenges us is DoD operates their weapon systems for a really long time, and they never want to have a case where support for a necessary, like a required library, goes away. And open source projects come and go, and you know what I mean. But I would argue companies come and go, and if you if you make the best decision you can about like OpenSSL,
right?
It's been around for a long time. As a project, it's probably not going to go anywhere anytime soon. As an open source project, those kinds of things. Kubernetes is going to be around for a while, right? I'm okay if we bank on some of these things. So I think that's been one of the things is fear in a program manager to tie themselves to something that may not be here 10 or 12 or 15 years down the road. Or if it's not here, they want to have a legal entity to blame, like a company. In an open source world,
that's a good point.
They can't do that. And my thing is, with our software, one of the Defense Innovation Board's big mantras is software is never done, but it also continuously evolves, continuously refactor it. If you have code in your operational code base that's more than 5 or 8 years old, you need to massively look at that code and probably refactor it and continuously reevaluate the libraries you're using. So I think we should get to a point where we're developing our code effectively, so we can and it's designed well so that a library dependence, if a small open source project that we used for one capability goes away, we can easily incorporate something else and just keep rolling with it. That's where I'm at.
I think it's a psychological. Yes, Nick.
So I think you're exactly right. I think what you just described is, first, we shouldn't never get too dependent on any single libraries, and by building modular software and microservices, you actually should be able to replace things pretty quickly. But also, what's interesting is you see something like the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, starting to exist, right? Which, Kubernetes becomes part of CNCF, and now you have a foundation supporting Kubernetes. So it's not going to, go away anytime soon, because they are putting the resources behind it, and several companies are contributing to the community. And that's, I think, where the future of the big open source project will go. And that's, I think, what's going to mitigate that risk of something going away versus, quite honestly, a company that gets sold every day. Look at, Red Hat, for example, being sold to IBM this year, right? So that's something that potentially could have scared a lot of people, even though it's going pretty well right now. But who knows what can happen in 2 years, 3 years. So at the end of the day, I think the answer is probably with a foundation system with open source, and also making sure you don't get vendor locked to any library or any product.